All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our kickoff seminar webinar, and I'm going to turn it over to our lead partner here on the training side of things with Venue Solutions Group, Russ Simons. Russ.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to have you join us today. I'm the Chief Listening Officer and Managing Partner for Venue Solutions Group. Our practice has been in business a little over 10 years. My partners, Mike Woolley and I, when we began this, we made a commitment to be a friend of the industry. It's in our culture, and I think we prove it or try to prove it each and every day. About 3.5 years ago, Richard Andersen and I started talking about a need for training in our industry, a need for training that recognized the unique challenges of adult learning, and trying to create an environment where a program of training could be built upon from year to year and create an environment so that our workers had an opportunity to fully embrace our commitment and responsibilities to our guests. This webinar today is a result of that commitment to being a friend of the industry. We're excited to be able to bring training in a most unique time, certainly that I've ever experienced. I'm sure it's the same for the rest of you. As we have an opportunity to be home, we started thinking about what are the things we can do in this environment that maybe create some skill sets that will help to energize people on their return to their facilities. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Richard Andersen. And once again, we thank you for joining us. Stay safe.
Yeah, thanks, Russ. And again, it's a great pleasure to be sharing this with Russ. And this will be the first of 6 webinars we'll be doing at this exact same time, Wednesday mornings, 11 Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific time. Today, we're going to talk about finding your why and why that's even important. And for Russ and I, and for all of you, I'm quite confident this will be, whether you know a little about it or a lot, the most important question you could ever ask in your career, and candidly in your life. And so we're going to give you some insights and ways to actually get in touch with that, because candidly, most of us miss it. We're going to give you 3 insights, 3 simple things that anyone can do that will absolutely boost and enhance your career. And then we're going to talk about and provide you a specific system and a strategy and how to strategically build and manage the important relationships, not only in your career, but really in your life. And then at the end, right on the half hour, we plan on ending promptly. Russ and I, and also Adam Cook is on the phone with us as well today. We'll be available to answer questions, and we'll stay on as long as anyone would like as we walk through that. So let's start by talking about maybe the most challenging thing, and let's take maybe out of it, the most challenging thing any of us face in the workplace: working with other people. If I could go back, and I truly have no regrets. I believe anybody that wants to be successful has to forgive themselves for the things they miss. You spend 1 minute beyond learning from them and you're wasting time. That's my personal belief. But if I look back over my career, the number one obstacle to having greater successes in many of the areas I wish I would have had was my inability to effectively work with people. And I became clearly interested in that early on in my career. In the 90s, when I was working for Wayne Huizenga in South Florida, and I had an opportunity to go through some learning programs, and I began to realize that I was wired quite differently. And the reality is, we're all in a unique situation now. We're still working with people, although most of us are doing it in a quarantined or home or stay away, social distancing environment. But we will be back in the workplace, and right now you have a chance to enhance your toolkit. So the reality is, we're all unique. I've learned that the hard way. You know it. Most of you know it. Most of you don't do a lot about it. And I'm just being candid because of the training experiences I have. The reality is that it's all built around this. We're different because there are different things we aspire to do. There are different background histories we have and things we've learned along the way. We have a different view of how things go. We have fears and motivations. We're scared of things and excited by things differently than other people. We generally see the world in a different way. Let me tell you a quick story. It's a cold January day. A 43-year-old man was sworn in as the chief executive officer of his country. By his side was his predecessor, a famous general who 15 years earlier had commanded his nation's armed forces in a war that resulted in the defeat of Germany. This young leader was raised in the Roman Catholic Church. He spent the next 5 hours watching parades in his honor, and they stayed up till 3 o'clock in the morning celebrating. You know who I'd be describing, right? It's January 30th, 1933, and we're describing Adolf Hitler. And most people would have assumed, as I did when I first heard this story, we were talking about JFK, John Kennedy. The point of this is we make assumptions. We make assumptions on incomplete data. We think we know something. We think we know something about that person we're working with, but we really haven't gathered all the information. And so because of that, and we like to use this judging to valuing ladder, because of that, we immediately make judgments. And that's where the majority of our challenges come with our workmates. We're all human beings. We all showed up on that first day to be the best people we could be. And the reality is that my prejudices and my views of the world get in the way, and I judge somebody before I've actually done the things I need to do to make sure that I'm clear on who they are and what they might bring to the table. But what if, as you start to think about your why, you were able to spin that around and you were just, I'm going to take a deep breath. And as Russ loves to say, and I love to steal this phrase from him, if I could just check my ego at the door, take my medication, and it wasn't about me anymore. What if I looked at you and I said, hey, I'm going to seek to understand where you come from, the challenges you have and what you have to offer. I'm going to respect that you have insights and ideas that would actually make us and me collectively better. I'm going to appreciate that you're here and that you're bringing values and ways, things I don't understand, things I haven't experienced, things I haven't learned. I'm going to value the differences that you bring to the table. Imagine if instead of judging you and making assumptions about my workmates, I instead took a step back and thought about how I could better understand them, respect them better, appreciate them, and actually value what they bring to the table. What a difference that might make. As you look at these 9 individuals pulling together, the one thing they know, and the one thing you all know as you think about this right now in the confines of an alone space looking at this webinar, is none of us are as smart as all of us. And if I really surround myself with my workmates and I do all the things we just talked about, my why begins to take shape. I start to think about the world in terms of others, and it's not all about me. So I want to ask you a question. What inspires you?
Walt Disney, 60 years ago, challenged his staff with one simple sentence. The sentence was, find a way every single day to take 5 minutes and create the memory for one of our guests. Create that moment, the magical moment that will live with them their entire lives. Take 5 minutes every single day and do that. I had a chance to take my daughters to Disneyland. I'll never forget this. I mean, so many moments the staff created and the place created, the atmosphere created. But one moment, we were on the line for the ride, Soarin', and we got right to the front of the line, and it happened to me the exact day of my daughter Ella's 5th birthday. She had this button on that said, today's my birthday. And the woman working there looked at her and said, it's your birthday? And she said, do you know what that means? That means you can help be in charge of the ride. You can help run the ride. You want to help me run the ride? And she called my daughter over to the other side of the computer terminal and pointed out how my daughter would help run the ride. And she said, do you see that little computer screen, that little monitor? When the doors open there, that means the ride is over. And the people that are on right now, they'll be getting off. When those doors on that screen open, they're getting off. She said, when that happens, you're going to get to push this button right here. She showed her the button. And she said, but wait, watch the screen, wait till the doors open. And my daughter watched and watched and watched the screen until the doors opened. And then she pushed that button and our doors opened so we could go and join the ride. This woman got Walt Disney's point. As a leader, as a parent, what do you do to communicate your vision so that it's so clear, so concise, that a decade after you've talked about it, maybe even 60 years after you talked about it, it's still impacting lives. It's still having a ripple effect.
I think most of us will agree that by and large, Disney really gets it right. They know their why. The people that are working at Disney know their why. When you look at the employees that were in that video, It wasn't about them, it was about that little girl. And here we are all these years later looking at a video that Jonathan and his family put together about their experience. People were inspired. So let's talk about what inspires you. When you think about this as a leader, as a coworker, as a parent, as a friend, as a family, in the hospitality industry and generally, as we run venues, you know, as we lead and support venues, as we create great entertainment for guests and support them in our hospitality efforts. Nobody did this better that I've been around than LAFC. I had an opportunity to spend most of last summer in Los Angeles helping be a part of their management team. And I had a chance to be a pretty significant part of a great stadium crew there, but I also got embedded into the senior leadership and the management of the organization. And what I learned about this organization is that they know their why. They're deeply passionate about bringing joy and uniting their community together. And everybody feels it. And it's not just at the top. You can see it when you go to a MLS match at Banc of California Stadium. You see the booster group marching in to that stadium. They're excited, and it's year round, and it's all the time. And the point Simon Sinek makes in Start With Why in his book, which I encourage you to read, is if something's going to have an impact, it's got to belong to those that join it, not that those that lead it. So when you think about what inspires you, I'd ask you to think for a second, what are you most proud of that you've been connected to in the workplace? And in this case, I'm not talking about money you've made or metrics. I'm not talking about anything you've gotten. I'm talking about what you've given. And we're talking about where you really feel this joy. And we've all felt it. And some of us feel it more than others. But this joy you feel of something you know where you're making a difference, where you're significant and not just successful, where you know you've actually mattered. Like the person running that ride and the expression on that little girl's face in the Disney video, that was a difference maker. And when you think about that, then you think, like, in terms of my own inspiration, in terms of my why, what's my impact? Like, how do I know I'm making an impact? How do I know that my why matters? So I want to ask you a question. We're going to put up a short little poll here, but I want you to think about this. How do others inspire you? When you think of somebody you work for, somebody that really lifts you up, how do they inspire you? Is it how they do it? Is it why they do it? Is it when they do it? Or is it what they do? So I want you to think about that. I'm going to put this poll up on the screen and ask you to quickly vote. Choose A, B, C, or D. How they do it, why they do it, when they do it, what they do. And I'll just give you a few seconds here to do this. Very good. Give you just about 10 more seconds here. Got a significant amount of votes here. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll here. If you didn't vote, I think you'll still get the point. About 70%, 7 out of 10, I'm sorry, about 38% felt that it's how they do it. About 31 said why, 3% said when, and so roughly about a third for what, why, and how they do it. Take a look at these photos here, and let's just really understand what it is that motivates us. And I don't believe there'll be any argument when we think a little more about this. All 7 of these people represent literally hundreds, if not thousands, of people that have in one way or another inspired others to do things that they otherwise would not have jumped into the middle of, and yet they did. So what I would argue, and what Simon Sinek says, is that people do not buy what we do. They buy why we do it. Martin Luther King didn't say, I got a plan, I got a strategy. And all of us have heard that speech, and I don't care where you came from. When you hear it, you can't do anything but go, man, what an incredible inspiration. He said, I have a dream. It was his why, and people couldn't wait to join. So let's look into this a little bit. And it starts with why. Simon talks about how most of us look at this what, how, why. And most all of us know what we do. It's our result. We know what we do. If you think about what you do at work, you pretty much know, about 100% of us know what it is we do. Most of us know how we do it, although not everybody understands the process. Some of us just show up and get it done, but most of us understand the process. But here's where very few of us, myself included, until I began to dig down into this and really be focused on my own passion and where my life could have more meaning, was my why. And so at the end of the day, knowing why changes everything. And you can think about companies that embrace why, like Apple, and that's a company with why. Why is our motivation. It's what we believe. I have a dream. I can't wait to join somebody that has a dream. So when you're around that, that's what drives it. How are then the actions we take to achieve or realize our why? And the what is actually the result. And some people will say, well, my why is I make a check. No, that's the result. You make money as a result. This is the difference between what people chase, success and significance, making a difference in people's lives. And when we truly get our hands wrapped around the fact that we're here, and the joy really comes from doing something that makes a difference. And in our industry, we really get a chance. The neocortex, and I'm going to just put a quick diagram, a very elementary one of the brain, but the neocortex, the newer part of the brain, is really where analysis and data comes from, right? So that is not what we're talking about. We're talking about the limbic brain. And in the limbic brain, this is guttural. This is where we feel, I'm just not sure. I see all the data and I understand what you're saying, but I just don't feel it. And every one of us on this webinar have had that. And that's where this comes from, the limbic brain. There's no language. I can't actually describe it. If you had that feeling, I can't actually describe it, but I'm just not feeling this, Tom. Sally, I'm not sure we can do this. So that comes from the limbic brain, and it's connected to the why. So what is about what we're doing? How we do it? Why is the inspiration behind our whole life, and really where the joy comes from. We talked about earlier in terms of what really inspires us. So when you think about this golden circle, what we really want to do is get our hands around why we're doing what we're doing. And when you see the little girl at Disney and you see that ride operator and the impact she had, she went home that day going, man, this was fun. And so that was her why, was making a difference in people's lives. I want to share just a short story here, more personal. For many of you that will know, a little older, that's Atlanta Fulton County Stadium. That was the home of the Braves into the 1990s. And in the 70s, I was living in Atlanta. I was a huge fan of the Braves. I went there as often as I could. $2 ticket. I'd sit up in those red seats and sneak down into the blue. I'm the guy you hated, but there weren't many people going. But what I loved about going to a Braves game, and I didn't think about it until after I got in our industry, was the sense of community. It was fun. People were together. There were sort of tribes, families, groups, enjoying each other. And we were all cheering on the hometown team, no matter where we came from or what we were doing. In the late 70s, Ted Turner bought the Braves. And I kept thinking, man, I hate what I'm doing. I was in my early 20s. And so I typed up a resume, sent it into the Braves, excited that I might have an opportunity to work there. And I heard nothing, crickets. 6 months later, I got a call. Richard, Andersen, yes. You still interested? Yes. Could you come in tomorrow for an interview? Of course. I came in the next day at 11 a.m. to the stadium, right, that you're looking at. The second question they asked me was, so do you know how to drive a bus? Well, I didn't know how to drive a bus, but I was pretty sure I could. And they didn't ask me had I driven a bus. I'd driven farm equipment. So I said yes. And it was that bus you see pictured right there. And so there I was, getting hired by the Atlanta Braves to go to Greenwood, South Carolina, to be the single A GM for $6,000 a year, which even then sounds like nothing now. It was nothing back then. Greenwood is not Greenville. It is literally in the middle of nowhere. The next biggest city is Abbeville, 30 miles away, and Clinton, another 30. So it's in the middle of nowhere. That's what it looked like when I was there on a busy day. That was how the trains crossed the streets there, no traffic. This was a small hole-in-the-wall town at that time. That was my utopia. That was my first stadium. I was so excited. I got up in the morning. I couldn't wait to get to work. It was just amazing. Here I was, the minor league GM of the Greenwood Braves. I had no idea what I was going to be doing, but I was excited by it. Now, I was so poor, I could not afford an apartment, $6,000 a year. That great building you see there, as crummy as the picture is, that was actually the office. And it was also where I kept my rollaway sleeper, and I slept at night with no TV. And I'm going to be honest and say there were nights I cried because I was lonely. I didn't know anybody. I was 24 years old, but I was so excited about this job. There I was, Legion Stadium, Greenwood, South Carolina. I was going to make my stand right here. So I'd get up in the morning, I'd go all day long, I'd work till 10 o'clock at night, and I'd wake up the next morning joyful, and I was doing actually pretty well. About 2 months in, I had this idea that I sort of cobbled together for some other ideas that we would do this promotion for the biggest ice cream sundae. And here's where the why comes in. The biggest ice cream sundae in the world, in our mind at that time. So I went to the only restaurant in town that served ice cream, the Dairy Barn. There were no McDonald's or Dairy Queens or anything like that in Greenwood. And I asked the gentleman that ran the place there, I asked him if he'd be willing to chat with me. And he said, I don't buy advertising, Mr. Andersen, but you know, if you want to come and chat with me, if you'll come Saturday night at the end of the work night, I'd be happy to meet with you. So yeah, what time do you close? We close at 11. I was enthusiastic. I showed up at 10:30, waved at him and went out, sat in my car. About 11:15, he tapped on my window and went over and sat in his truck, and I shared with him the difference we could make in this community. If we did this cool ice cream sundae, people from all over, all walks of life would come out and we'd eat all the ice cream on the field. It would get great news. It'd be exciting and bring people together. It'd be a sense of community. I don't do any advertising, Mr. Andersen. I'll think about it. Call me tomorrow. I called him the next day and he said, you know, as I told you, we don't do advertising, but I'm really, I'm excited by your enthusiasm. I'm excited by the fact that what you're doing is really kind of inspiring, that you want to bring people together. So I'm going to give it a shot. 2 months later, we put on an ice cream sundae for Greenwood, South Carolina, 360 feet long, in gutters, separate containers, well over 100 gallons of ice cream consumed in about 6 minutes. And it was an amazing event. I had found my why. My reason for being there was to make a difference, just like yours and in the industry we're in. We all have them. So the point that Russ and I want to make in this is that when you're thinking about why you show up for work each day and how you inspire the people that work with you, when they see your why and when you identify with your why, it's a game changer. When you're just showing up to get through the motions, things don't go as well. So let's move to the second part of this, which is our career builders. There's a couple of concepts here we want to share with you. The first is, and these are pretty obvious, but we don't actually do them. Think about people you know right now that work hard, the people that you admire the most. Show up early, stay late, always working hard. So the first one is to work hard. The second one's to be enthusiastic. Enthusiasm is contagious. We love being around somebody that has enthusiasm. And the last is to embrace change. If you do those three things, you can conquer anything. Work hard, be enthusiastic, embrace change. It does not take any great skill to do that. You don't have to have a great education. You don't have to come from a certain community. You don't have to have a certain income. But the people that work hard, that are enthusiastic, that embrace change, in every instance, if they're patient and they stay at it, they go to the head of the class. They are not the people at the water cooler that say, I can't believe the boss came up with this. What are we doing this for? They're the people that say, come on, we can do this. Brett Butler. I met him in 1980 when I was a minor league GM in Richmond. Brett Butler was a guy that loved baseball. He played in high school. He was way below physical stature for a professional baseball player. And at the end of his high school career, he told his baseball coach, I really want to play college. And his baseball coach literally scoffed and laughed at him and said, Brett, you need to go find something else to do. You're never going to make it at baseball. He wanted to play baseball so bad that he tried to get into universities. Nobody would take him. And so ultimately, he ended up at Southeastern Oklahoma College. And he played there for a couple of years. And when that was over, same thing with his coach. I really love to play in the pros. Can you help me? I'll do what I can, but you know, nobody's going to take you. Don't be disappointed. Brett was taken in the 23rd round for those that follow baseball, like literally at the end of the draft in 1978. Signed to a low A team and fought his way through, and decent enough player. And I met him in 80. He played for us in 81 in Greenwood, where he hit .336 and was the International League's most valuable player in 1981. In 1982, he started the season with the Atlanta Braves, and the Braves got off to a 13-0 Major League Baseball record start of the season. And yet 2 months later, they sent Brett down because of a player trade. And even though he was actually playing pretty well, they sent him down. Now, when players get sent down from the major leagues, it typically takes 72 hours. They're angry, they're frustrated, it's everybody else's fault. Brett was told at 3 o'clock. He left the clubhouse, asked the clubhouse attendant to pack his bags for him. He went straight to the airport, got on the first plane, walked in the clubhouse in Richmond at 5:30, asked the manager to put him in. He played that night. He played for the next 2 months, first guy at the park, last guy to leave, always cheering his teammates on. No matter what the situation was, he was embracing it. 17 years later, after he got called up 2 months after that, he was still in the big leagues. He ended up being a Major League Baseball All-Star. He was 7th in the MVP voting one year, played in the World Series, won the Lou Gehrig Award, was Baseball Writers Man of the Year, many player awards. He's a cancer survivor who's become a spokesperson. Work hard, be enthusiastic, embrace change. If you do those 3 things, whether you're the CEO or you're just starting out, it's a game changer. And then the last thing we want to share with you is a strategy about how you can build lifelong connections. There's nothing more important, as we know, than having relationships with the right people. And so the system we've put together divides it into 3 categories: advocates, prospects, and suspects. We learned this from Al Weiss, who wrote a book called $1 Million Consultant. I read it a number of years ago. Fascinating insight. And in terms of advocates, what we mean by this are people that would stand for you. You know, I know Max, and he's a superstar. This is a guy, he's a young man, but he shows up early. When you ask him to do something, he does it. I love him. I'd do anything for him. So if you're just starting out, you know, it might be your parents, you know, you certainly hope it's your spouse if you're married, your relatives, but also as you move in your career, it's former clients, it's teachers, it's coaches, it's current clients. It could be a religious leader. It could be anything, but who stands for you, Sally? Who stands for you, Tom? Who's somebody, if I said, tell me about Russ, they would say, amazing, he's the guy. The next is prospects. And so these are people that are focused in the chosen field you want to go. Maybe you want to be a building GM. Maybe you want to be head of sales. Maybe you want to be running the marketing department. It could be anything. What is your goal? What's your vision? How can I be strategic about meeting people that can help me grow there? So you start thinking about the people that have the skill sets or the contacts you need. These would be people, prospects that know you, but they don't know you well enough yet to stand for you. So you want to think about who those are. And then finally, suspects, people you probably don't know, but they are the rock stars in the chosen field and area you want to be. And so you identify who these people are by name and focus. And you're strategic, and instead of these columns of categories, their names are in here, and you start thinking about ways you can meet them. Maybe they're giving a speech and you show up and you simply go up in a non-threatening way afterwards. Thank you, Mrs. Smith. That was an amazing presentation. I really appreciated it. I learned a lot. And maybe a couple of weeks later, you write them a handwritten note, which still is a gold mine. I just want to say, I've been reflecting on what you said. You always want to be genuine. I'm not suggesting you manipulate. Loved what you said. It's really had an impact on me. And that's it. Not like, can you help me get a job? And you have a couple of encounters with a person like that, or you volunteer and show up in a group that they're doing that you're passionate about, and you get to know them. And the idea of all of that is then you're strategically moving people from suspects to prospects to advocates, and you manage them by staying in touch with them. Do not be the person that calls someone, and the last time you called them, you asked for something, and now this is the next time you call them and you're asking again. Instead, be the person that stays in touch and says, you know, hey, Adam, I really appreciate all you've been doing. I just want to update you. Here's where I am. You know, please let me know if you're out this way. Thanks for everything. This takes work and it takes time. But if you do this, it is a game changer for you, guaranteed. So as we look through what we've talked about today quickly, we've talked about finding your why. It's the most important question you'll ever ask yourself. How do I know what inspires me? Well, you know the tools now to do that. And when I know, I've got to get in that road. It's got to be about making a difference in other people's lives. It's got to be about something significant, because the more things I get for myself only fill a hole temporarily. Once I figure out what it is I can do that brings joy and adds values to others, that's when I get up in the morning and I can't wait to be a part of it. The second thing we talked about is work hard, be enthusiastic, embrace change, be a Brett Butler. Don't be the person that's pulling other people aside. Don't gossip, stay away from it. Be the person that's always, you know, he's always working hard. You know, she's so enthusiastic. I love being around her. No matter what's going on, she just embraces it and we gonna make it happen. That's who you want to be around. Be one of those. You don't have to go run out and catch the ball in front of somebody else. Just wait on it. The ball will come to you, and be ready and be working hard and be enthusiastic and embracing change. And finally, be strategic in building relationships. Don't be manipulative. Stay in touch, cheer people on, let them know that they're a big part of your success, and do it in a strategic way. These 3 things will have more impact on your career than nearly anything else you can do. I want to tell you what's up next this coming Wednesday, and I'm telling you, don't miss this. Mike Song is amazing. He's going to give you specific hands-on tips. You'll literally see his phone on the screen. You'll see how he manages email. This won't save you a few minutes a week. It will save you hours a week. I guarantee it. So please show up next week. Make sure you register. We'll be sending out links, but it's 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 Eastern time, next Wednesday, May 6th. Mike Song. He'll also be back on May 27th, and we'll send you the whole list of seminars. We have Dina Crowder on in a couple of weeks, and she's just amazing. Works with a lot of the large entertainment business in and around the country and LA. So we look forward to you joining us then. So with that, we want to thank you for joining us. And I believe we're ending just about right on time. And so Russ and I will stay on to answer any questions. Thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks. All right, Adam, so what do we want to do to make sure people can put up their questions here?
Thanks, Richard. The question, so if you have on your screen, the bottom toolbar, there's a Q&A segment, a few little chat bubbles there. You can open that up, type in your question, we'll receive it, and we'll farm them out to Richard or Russ for any answers. Richard, we have one question about, is there a way to get the slides? Some folks are interested in the PowerPoint.
You know what I'd encourage you to do, and there's a couple of points in this. This video will be up on both on our site. So if you just go to the VSG Advantage Training website, or you'll be able to click on, and we'll have a link for that. So all of that will be up there. So yes, you will be able to have access to it. I also encourage you to read Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why. It's a phenomenal insight into, and we only had just a few minutes to cover it here.
Yeah, and just echoing that, this will be posted within the next 24 hours up to the YouTube page for VSG Advantage Training, and the link to that will also be on Facebook. So feel free to connect with us there, and we'll have everything for you. Another one that we've got from Matt Campbell: what have been the neatest ways you've seen to roll out core values to teams, especially when they haven't been used in the past?
One of the, and we promised this not to be commercial, but one of the programs that Russ and I and Adam and the partnership has put together is called Culture Matters. And we actually just finished the lion's share of this program with a top-notch Hollywood studio, Westbrook Inc., and it from their leadership had rave reviews. The focus around how we put values together is clearly in a team environment. So we actually did this virtually over a period of 3 sessions, almost 8 hours totally, doing their mission and values. And in each case, we had people understand how values work, what drives them, and then work in small groups, put their core values together, come back and share in larger groups. And so there's a number of dynamics involved in it, probably too involved to get on here, but Mac, I'm happy to have a sidebar conversation with you afterwards and share some of that material. It's a fascinating way to, the values don't matter if people don't embrace them. So from that perspective, they have to be actionable, and people have to be really clear on them. And we encourage to try and keep them to 4 or 5 or less, so people remember them, and that it's not a top down, but it's a collective, collaborative effort that the entire senior leadership team is a part of helping put together.
Follow-up question from our chat logs: what advice do you have for those that have lost their inspiration or their why after years in the industry?
Russ, are you still with us?
Yeah, sure am. Sure am.
You want to take that one?
So, I think the responses are going to be different depending on the individual, but what I can tell you is that when that's occurred in my career, I really made a purposeful, I thought about where I was and what I was doing. I thought about, what was really important to me. And I tried to really focus on the others that I saw were sort of exemplifying and what they're doing professionally and personally about where I aspired to be. And so it's easy to see how, for a variety of reasons, that we can kind of lose our way a little bit, and maybe the culture and the leadership in an organization could be an issue. But I think you just have to sort of look and say, who are the people who are exemplifying where I want to be and how I want to get there, and how do I start to associate myself with those people? And that may include making tough decisions. I mean, as a senior leader who's responsible for, and in his career really been responsible for tens of thousands of people, in some ways I look at the saying, if you can't change people, you can't change people. Well, I think that works for you personally as well. If the circumstances you were in are not going to yield the result you hope for, then I think you take a responsibility and see what you need to do and what you can do to change and make things different and better.
Yeah, Russ, I really love that answer, and I think it really builds on what we shared as well, that, you know, it's really important for all of us from time to time to take a step away and ask ourselves, what am I inspired by? What do I really love? What do I really want to be a part of? And then to go get in the middle of that, because to get up every day and slug it out, doing something that, you know, is making a check at the end of the day, you know, I think most of us would look back at our lives and go, wow, I wish, but there's no second chances. So I think it's really important to have that passion so that you can't wait to get up, and recognizing that circumstances impact a lot of that. Nonetheless, lots of people jump over the wall and then look back later and say, I was scared to death when I did it, but I look back now and I wouldn't have changed a thing. So I think, you know, amplifying what Russ says, encourage you to really check yourself.
Hey, Adam, I'd like to take a shot at Jennifer's question as well. As supervisors, how do we help our team members find their why? You know, I read an article this morning before this about how important it is to communicate early and often. And I think the failure in this communication comes in two ways. One is that we allow the people who work for us, we allow things to occur because we don't communicate. We're focused internally versus externally. And ironically, the question reflects when we started looking at what VSG Advantage training should be, our initial focus was on supervisors, because as in an industry, I think it's the weak point in our industry overall. A person gets to be a supervisor because they stood out in terms of their performance as a line staff. But as an industry, I don't believe we take a good look at if that person got selected to be a supervisor, yet their supervisor was not modeling the kind of behavior that was going to, embrace the industry overall, then there's a real good chance that we took a great employee and put them into a situation where they had an opportunity to fail. So I think we start by making sure that our supervisors understand the expectations that we have for them in the organization and their responsibilities and roles with their line staff. All too often, I see a situation where line staff feel like that they work for the supervisor. My view is completely opposite of that. I believe that the supervisor works for the line staff, and their responsibility and obligation is to give them the tools, the resources, and the communications necessary to be successful. And if that's not the case, we are never going to deliver service to our customers. So I think it's a great question, and I love the fact that you asked it. And Jennifer, I'm not surprised you did. But I think there are things we can do. So there are some big things we can do, and there's some small things, but I don't think anything in these conversations doesn't begin with communication.
Great. A couple of questions that are sort of on the timely manner that link together. For a lot of people, their why may be tied to the work they do, bringing events to their communities. Any tips for maintaining the why in these times when we can't do what we usually do? And tangentially to that, how do folks use this time to grow and connect?
You know, I'll start, and Russ, you may want to flavor this. You know, as you think about it, I don't think it's a lot different. Obviously, we're not putting on events, but everything we can do right now, even showing up for this webinar, is a great example. There are a lot of things going on out there where I can better prepare myself. The day will come when I'll walk back into work. And I certainly look back at my career and think about, man, I wish I had. Well, right now, we all have this opportunity. As much as it's not something we want, it is reality. So to embrace it and say, okay, what should I be reading? What should I be thinking about? What could I do that could better prepare me so that when I open my Disney ride, whatever that is in our world, I'm ready. You know, I'm ready to do it better than I did when I was out there before. The other thing I'd say, and Russ just said it, but I think it's really important that we communicate, that we're in touch with each other. If you're a leader, I think the most important thing you can do is tell your people the truth with empathy, but people don't need to be misled right now. And, You know, we all know there are people that have been laid off, lost their jobs, are being furloughed. There's a certain amount of uncertainty, and yet at the same time, all of us, if we're in a situation like that, are going to respect someone that tells us the truth so we can plan and is doing it empathetically, helping us everywhere they can. This will end. Use the time to do the things you really want to do. And I say this tongue in cheek, but I'm stealing it from Paul Turner in Dallas, who said, you know, my sock drawer has never been more organized. It's a time to get our lives organized.
So I'll take on Jamie's question about how do folks use this time to grow and connect, and I agree. You know, it's the spirit behind why we wanted to get this series of webinars going, because we thought people are home and there's a great opportunity for them to start thinking about how do we re-engage. There's a lot of work going on with IAVM members on the COVID-19 and how we restart, how we recover, and develop alternative facility use guides for our folks. I can tell you that many of you know I'm embedded at the SoFi Stadium in Hollywood Park, a new stadium in Southern California. We have purposely been looking at each department and looking at what kind of training we can do. We've developed a whole lot of online training. We've been able to sort of make available an opportunity for people to think about things that would help to improve their career, but we're also trying to take care of some things that are going to be really necessary. I mean, we're opening a new building, so there's a great opportunity to be able to get people up to speed in their incident command system and their NIMS training, some of those kinds of things. Also, all too often in our lives, we're so caught up with the pressures of the day-to-day. But if you have something that you aspire to, if you aspire to a promotion, to another job, or switching lanes in the field you're in, these are the kinds of times that you can actually do things to prepare you in terms of your knowledge, your education, your background in some of those areas. And so it's easier when someone tells you what to do, but again, it's not as meaningful when you talk about and think about, in the spirit of this conversation, your why. And then once you realize that, or you at least pick a direction, then start rowing in that direction and start to do some of the things that are going to actually make a difference. On a personal note, I'll tell you that, you know, we're all busy. I complain that I'm busy, and because of that, a lot of my personal relationships suffer. One of the things that I do each day is I write 3 names down on a pad on my desk. And at some point during that day, it's not just business and not just personal, it's a combination of both. And at some point during that day, I stop what I'm doing and I make a call to each of those 3 individuals. Sometimes I get them, sometimes I don't. When I don't, I leave a message that says something like, "No need to call me back. I just want you to know I was thinking about you." And the reason I do that is because people have done that for me. And the deep appreciative emotional response that I have when somebody unsolicited just says, "Hey, you were in my thoughts. I hope you're doing well. I appreciate what you're doing," whatever that is. You know, if you need another reason to sort of stand a little taller, walk a little faster, or maybe double check and doing your job that a little better, that's part of my why.
Some further questions. What is the best way to start over on the value ladder when you need to rework your relationship with direct supervisors or management?
So this is an easy one that's going to sound hard, but it starts with an honest conversation. And you can't make someone have something they don't want, no matter what you do. All you can do is keep your side of the street clean. But when you're harboring resentment, or in any way you're doing anything that causes another person to feel demeaned, it exacerbates a situation and causes it to be something it's not. So certainly my counsel is to go to that person at a time when it's convenient and right, not in a time of rush, and ask, "Hey, can I just have a chat with you?" And be honest with them. Say, "Hey, look, you know, I'm not sure, but you know, if I've missed something here, or I'm doing something that's not as effective as you need, or I just want to clean up, you know, whatever I need to do in our relationship. You're an important part of what I have going on. I think, and if you've done some things, I think you need to be honest. You know, once you tell somebody you're sorry, think about this. I'm sorry that I did this. I'm specific. I did not mean to move that over and block your car. I really apologize. it's over. Once you apologize, it's over. What else can the other person say? It's when we're defensive, when we don't listen, when we're not willing to respect what they have to say, appreciate, value, as we talked about a second ago. So I think in summary, it's an honest conversation. It's a heart-to-heart with no expectation. Simply go and be honest. And they may not say anything, or they may come back in a week or two, but that's the best chance and likely the resolution and the recipe to get back on the value ladder to where you have an effective play. And then you just got to live it. You just got to constantly remind yourself, and it's so challenging, but constantly remind myself, this is not about me. This is about you and how I can serve you. And when you have that perspective, it's all about servant leadership. You know, at the end of the day, once you are a servant leader, you don't have any more stress, and you don't really have bad relationships, because even people that are not great with you get over it. So I say have the honest conversation and go into it with no expectation.
For Jonathan Moore's question, what is your advice for supervisors that are in a difficult situation with their manager but don't have the experience to move outside the organization? One of the things that I live by, particularly in the times we're in right now, is a concept called science trumps emotion. And so in this case, I think it's easy for us to let our emotions rule our reaction. And so in this situation, I think you have to go back to the science, and I think you have to go back to sort of starting to understand the person you're having the difficult situation is. And Richard talked about this a little bit in terms of when we started this, but there are tools and a way to analyze, to really step back and say, okay, let's get over the emotion. Hey, this person's a jerk. Let's start thinking about, okay, let's think more about this person. Let's understand this person better. There are different types of people. Richard, you might jump in a second and just give an example of that. And there are people who like and need to receive information in a different way, and they like to be communicated with in a different way. And back to honest conversation, like say, is your emotional response keeping you from understanding the science of actually how to deal with an individual, and through that improve the way that you communicate, and through that actually be able to improve that situation so that you can get the experience that you need in order to be able to take your career in the direction that you need to go. And Richard, you might comment on the different personality types and how important it is to understand who you're talking to and how you communicate.
Yeah, Russ, it's a brilliant answer. And I think most everybody knows that with VSG Advantage Training, we utilize DISC in a lot of our training because it's a need-based behavioral profile that's a common language, that's non-threatening, that allows people to really see themselves for how they're wired. It's scientifically, solid and verifiable. And we've done thousands and thousands of these group of individuals in our hundreds of facilitations over the years for this. So we know scientifically it's clear. And it basically says that, there are opposites. There are people that are more outgoing, and there are people that are more reserved. And oftentimes those people struggle when they work together. There are people that are questioning and really want to drill down. There are people that are accepting. And so again, you end up with this sort of challenge that if you don't value the differences, and when you get somebody that's fast-paced and questioning paired with someone that is reserved and accepting, the dial's off the meter. It can be really challenging. So it's about taking a step back, as Russ said, and understanding that science, which clearly trumps emotion. And once you actually say, okay, wait a second, this isn't about me, as we've said earlier. Another thing I'd suggest, and it's an older book, but it's as relevant today. I've got it on my shelf here. It's as relevant today as it was when he wrote it, is by Dale Carnegie, How to Deal with Difficult People. And in fact, in a couple of weeks, and you'll get this link, we are actually going to do a 30-minute session on dealing with difficult people. And so there'll be some great tips on that. But I think Russ hit it on the head.
So Mike Alberstein asks, did your why change consistently with every job you had and develop consistently over time? And I'll take the first shot at this, and Richard, you might weigh in.
I could just say no.
Well, yeah, my why has definitely changed. When I began in this industry as a a project coordinator to do college basketball. My why was, I didn't think I had a why. I think I had to survive, right? Like, oh my God, don't get fired. My why has changed over time, but a lot of it's changed when I realized that that it wasn't about me, that I wasn't going to be judged by what I could do, but I was going to eventually be judged by the success of the people I was responsible for. And that realization, which is a real challenge for people up to middle management, let's say, middle managers or emerging managers, you'll see them sit down and say, just let me in there and let me do that, because I can do it faster than you can do it. And I know it'll be right. But what they missed in all that is that unless you're willing to make that commitment to every time that needs to be done, that it's not successful. When you start to realize that you have to give people enough role and responsibility, you have to let them fail, hopefully coach them not to fail in the same way twice, and that you're ultimately judged by the success of the people that you're responsible for, your why changes dramatically in terms of what's important to you.
Yeah, I agree, Russ. And hey, Mike, thanks for joining us. My biggest challenges in my career, and I've had some, are self-inflicted because I wasn't focused on you, the other person. But when I am focused on the other people, and that's really driven by my why, because now I'm inspired, I want to make sure that the community comes together and we have this amazing experience with an ice cream sundae on the field. I mean, how crazy is that? But, we did it on a 94-degree day in South Carolina, by the way. And people rallied and were excited and they were in it. And it was joyful and there really was no energy. But when it's about me and here's what I want, and I need you to do this and this and this, and sometimes we do have to be direct, but that's when things get derailed. So my why has changed. I've certainly evolved. I think Twain said it best, he said, as long as you're green, you're growing. When you start thinking you're right, that's when you get rotten. And so I think that's really important. Being on webinars like this, reading, learning, using this time right now to better equip ourselves, understanding, and it's why Russ and I wanted to kick this off, understanding what deeply matters to you. This isn't just like, oh, fluff. This is like core, folks, for those that are still here. For anyone that I've ever had a chance to connect to, people that are in touch with their why I do this. I've known Russ Simons for 25 years. I consider him one of the most inspirational people I know. And a big part of why I wanted to be a part of this company with Mike and Tom and him was what they stand for. Russ is all about making a difference. He practices what he preaches. They show up. It's always, I've heard Russ say it 1,000 times. Hey, just do the right thing. That's inspiring. So when you do that as a leader at whatever level, emerging, senior, it's not always instantaneous gratification, but over time, you build a network, a following of loyal people who trust you because you've told the truth, like Russ has, that really get your why. So Mike, I do think it morphs and it changes. And when I screw up, I forgive myself and I go right back, because it doesn't do any good, to regret stuff. You just gotta okay, what can I learn and move on?
A couple of questions from anonymous attendees. Do you have any suggestions for how to create a culture of finding your why within a team when it may not be supported across the organization? I've actually lived this personally, and if I felt like that the leadership or the culture of the organization was not actually going to lend itself to that, then I literally created my own subtext within the organization. While I couldn't maybe affect the organization as a whole, I could certainly affect my attitude and how I conducted myself, and I could affect the attitude and the support for the people that I interacted with and that I was most directly involved in. And I think my answer to that is, that there's a lot of things that flow downstream from being in an organization where you feel like that where your contribution is maybe not appreciated or you're not moving in the direction you need to be. And that could be another hour-long seminar at some point in the future. But and don't get caught up in what you can't do, but find inspiration in what you can do. And I think that's the best way to think about that. Also, what could be a why for those in sales that aren't money related? And I would think a lot of people in sales, particularly initially in sales, struggle with that question. It really is about you know, where do you find joy? Where do you find success? If it's not about, you know, whatever the commission is on the sale, then do you take personal pride in conducting yourself in a professional manner that led to a successful business conclusion? Do you begin a relationship with an individual as a part of the sales process? Have you conducted yourself in a highly professional manner? What did you learn in that conversation, and how can you take what you learned in that conversation to make others better?
Hey, Russ, if I could add to that as well. You know, the idea of selling and making money, we all get it. That's a part of how the carrot and the stick works. But it becomes, and hear this, it becomes a commodity at that point. It's no longer about something you're inspired to sell, because now, you know, you might have to reduce the price, you might have, you know, and it becomes something other than this this exciting thing you're doing. And if you think back to the examples that probably everybody has in one time or another, where you've been excited, whether you're a salesperson or not, to sell somebody on an idea, when they've bought into it, much like that silly ice cream sundae story, they bought into it because they were inspired, and because you were inspired is why they bought into it. Remember, you know, people join something and they're the ones that make it happen. It's not the leaders that make it happen. So you as the salesperson need to be selling something you really love and you really believe in, that you think is making a difference. And then money will take care of itself, because you'll show up and people will gravitate towards you.
Gregory Cohen asks, how do we manage the shift in what working hard means to the new workforce? And Greg, you may have just asked a question that I'm not actually prepared to answer. You know, right now in my organization here in Los Angeles, I have about 130 people. Many of those people are fall into all of these, you know, the Gen X, Gen Z, Gen, I don't know. I'm learning this as we speak. So I don't really have advice in terms of what working hard means, but this is a little bit like what you've all heard. It's like when you may not have the definition of something, you still probably know what it is when you see it.
And Richard, a question over for you. What was your job before becoming the GM in Greenwood?
Well, I had a few, but as a very quick story, I sold insurance door to door to door in South Florida. I was terrible at it. I was so bad. My boss rode accounts with me one day, and I did the best I could. I was early 20s, and we came back about 3, as we normally would, and it's the only time I'd been around him. His name was Joe Irby. He called me in his office about 4:15, and I was expecting to get some tweaks and a pat on the back, and he said, "Hey, Richard, you're an incredibly bright young man, lots of enthusiasm, energetic. You know, I really love your attitude. And when you decide where you're going to make your stand, you're going to be really good. It's just not going to be here. So go ahead and pack up. This is your last day." True story. And I got in my banged up 68 Dodge Dart, and I cried all the way home. I couldn't believe I gotten fired. You know, and he did me the greatest favor ever. And I'll connect this back to the question, because as leaders, we often keep people around that we know are not capable. And that's not to suggest we don't want to do everything we can to help people succeed. And, you know, 95 to 99% of them will, when we have that attitude. But there are always people that are going to be around us at one time or another in a career that are not fit for a specific job. And we're not doing them a favor. We're not doing their coworkers a favor. We're not doing the organization a favor when we keep them around. And without him, I would have never been in Atlanta to have the opportunity to throw my resume into the Braves, to end up in this career that, you know, I mean, what else would I live my life for? Every day I get to get up and be a part of an industry where people come together in venues and they bond. You know, they will again after this COVID-19, but they bond and they have experiences, and they say, "I remember when my dad took me," and so, I mean, how good is that? So, yeah, I think that's, I was an insurance salesman, and not a very good one.
So the last thing we want to respond to is a question that was asked about morning routines. And I want to address this question only because I'm interested in what Richard's answer is. For me, in a morning routine, I really try to think about, as I'm heading to work, what are the most important things that I'm hoping to accomplish that day. That's really what I'm focused on. more importantly is my routine after work these days, which is to not just leave my job and go home and and sit in a chair. It's to get out, get some fresh air, clear my mind, that kind of thing. Right now on this job site, because we're under construction, the last thing I try to do every day is walk a part of the building. That helps to re-inspire me and to and just to be engaged and reminded and up to speed with what goes on, and then just try to be thoughtful. In fact, I find myself watching less television, which is interesting because I like television as an escape. But Richard, I'm interested in what you do.
Yeah. So thanks, Russ. The first thing I try to do each day after you get up and do the necessaries is, if my wife is up, I don't do this if she's still sleeping, but I like to start out with something successful, like, make up the bed, just be organized, something really simple, as silly as that sounds. And then on my best days, the first thing I do after I get a cup of coffee is I go sit somewhere quietly. And in my case, I try to spend 30 minutes with the God of my understanding and just focus on what I should be up to today that might make a difference, and that I might be able to be used. And those are on my best days, because I don't do that every day, and it should be a habit that I do. And then the final thing I do at the end of each day is I make a really clear list and a priority. I'm a list maker. It doesn't make me good or bad, but that's just how I address it. And I try to put a list together with priorities, because I know I can't manage time, but I can manage priorities for what I need to get done tomorrow. So I go to bed with in mind what's got to happen tomorrow. I try to get up in the morning and have success right away. And then I try to be quiet and still and listen to that voice inside, so I understand how I can be used as opposed to using others.
Great, and that covers all of our questions. So Richard or Russ, if you want to wrap us up. And
yeah, well, Russ, you may want to add a word too. But I said thanks everybody for joining. I know a few moments ago we still had more than way over 100 people still on, and I think we're in awe and flattered. And the whole idea started with Russ, and we just kind of followed through together on this. But we really want to do in some small way add value and make a difference. So hope you'll join us in the coming weeks. Mike's song's going to be amazing next week, and thanks to Adam Cook, who's been amazing in the background making this happen. Russ, anything you want to add?
Yeah, just listen, this is free. This is our responsibility to the industry. We hope that if you enjoyed this, you will share the upcoming information on the other webinars. And thank you for being here. Be safe out there.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks to the IEVM for their great support, and look forward to joining you next week, Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern and 8 a.m. Pacific. Thanks, everybody.